will be focused, as the title of the seminar said, in Ansible as automation tool, and we'll be reviewing specifically all the benefits and the main features of Ansible. So the expectation is, by the end of this webinar, to understand how Ansible automation can help us to address the DevOps challenges. And certainly we'll be viewing and discussing about what are really the DevOps challenges. After that, we'll be learning about how to use Ansible in DevOps, identifying the main advantages. And certainly before to implement Ansible, we need to consider in a very detailed way what are the prerequisites, such as the control machine and managed node requirements. You will see that we have these two main elements in the Ansible implementation, the control machines and the managed node requirements. And certainly we'll be doing a review about not only the prerequisites, the most famous operating systems that we will be using to implement Ansible. Finally, well, sorry about this, the last part will be a little technical because we'll be reviewing some commands of Ansible plugins, filters, patterns, and that part certainly will be technical because will be some syntaxes of the commands, some parameters of the commands, and the structure or the filters and plugins. Before to start, as we usually do, we'll be reviewing some characteristics of DevOps implementation as well. So the topics that we'll be covering, as I said, the Ansible and DevOps challenges, because certainly DevOps is bigger than Ansible. Ansible is a tool, is part of one of the main elements of DevOps. We'll be reviewing the benefits of Ansible IT automation. And at this point, we could consider that Ansible is not only the most famous tool for IT automation, is one of the tools that provide more benefits as well. What are the Ansible advantages? Will be other topics. And as I said, not only prerequisites, we'll be reviewing really quick the architecture of Ansible. The last part will be the technical one, playbooks, command lines, plugins, filters, and patterns. And the final conclusion to implement Ansible. Okay, so when we talked about DevOps, that implies high velocity innovation through the continuous integration and testing, the continuous delivery and deployment, and the continuous operation. Sometimes we refer DevOps only as a DevOps tool change, and this is very typical in the company. You know, when we hear something about the role DevOps engineer, well, this is basically for the tools, right? The tools certainly are across all the organization, and the tools will support the continuous integration for build and test, the release and deploy it, and the operation and monitor. The IT value chain approach is related to move all the business demands to the market as quicker as possible. So, as I said, the main 4 blocks of DevOps are the culture, is something where we need to start, related to cooperation, collaboration, share all the information, and promote the continual learning and experimentation. Is related to process, to optimize the traditional process, not only for development, where we are coming from the traditional project management to the Agile, to the Scrum, and it's including testing and operation. And operation is just to simplify what we know as the traditional ITIL environment, taking advantages of the main process. I'm talking about incident management, problem management, change management, release management, and a continuous integration. The tools is exactly what we'll be talking about today. Ansible is part of this block, is part of tools. Ansible will allow not only work with different tools, will allow to automate and configure other tools, will allow to link different environments into the infrastructure. So that will be covering the automation and reducing the latency. So just consider this, right? It's DevOps is not only tools, it's culture, it's process, it's infrastructure are certainly tools. Okay, so let's start with the today topics. Ansible is really a powerful IT automation and configuration management tools. In terms of DevOps, Ansible can be considered to target 4 main automation areas. It's development, it's operations, security and QA, and business, right? These are the key automation targets. So what are the DevOps challenges that I mentioned? So first, let's consider some DevOps challenges. So for those in dev, the focus is on results, right? It's typical, the focus is on results. And they have to be careful not to spend too much time on the tooling required to deliver the product or service. So tooling should be something really easy, fast, easy to implement, easy to use, and not spend a lot of time on this. And they need to respond and scale as demand requires. Otherwise, you have business risks, right? So scaling is other main term for automation. So for operation, generally speaking, or ops, this requires cross-organizational technology, right? An operation must be able to centrally govern and monitor system and workflows. Remember the wall of division between development and operation. So from a DevOps perspective, from operation, we need to be able to govern, to orchestrate and monitor all the system, not only the operation system, the dev and the test system as well. And these systems and workloads are disparate system and workloads, you know? So meaning that they can vary amongst different technologies and deployment and so on. So for security and QA, this requires the ability to monitor and track changes, obviously, and further to that, where and when those changes were made. So again, for security and QA, the emphasis is to reduce risks associated with human error, typically. So for business, the last block, the goal is to go to market as quickly as possible. All of us who work in the company, we could pay attention in technology, we could like processes, however, business matters. So the goal always for business is go to market as quickly as possible. From our side, we need to assure the quality, right, and respect some processes. But from a business perspective, we need to be first, that's our competitors, and consistently perform activities that are going to generate competitive advantages and focus on growth. So these are basically the main goals for business. Moving to specifically the development challenges that are addressed by Ansible. So Ansible addresses development challenges by first creating a feedback loop. This is one of the main benefits in applying Ansible. So you can think of it as an accelerated evaluation of products and services emanating from development. In addition, bugs are discovered early in the development lifecycle. You know, the faster we detect the bugs, the cheaper will be. So that means that addressing those bugs is easier, less risky, and certainly as well less costly. So Ansible can help reduce the risk of tribal knowledge. I think that you know what does it mean, right? The tribal knowledge is when you have in a company certain group of people that knows a specific knowledge, and they don't share that knowledge with the rest of the company. Using Ansible, you could reduce that effect because all the knowledge, all the information will be clearly documented in Ansible, right? This is knowledge about products, customers, and processes that only certain employees understand, right? And it is a major problem, and one that many companies are either unaware, as you know, or aren't concerned about sometimes. But the risk is not only that you don't have documented the knowledge. The risk is that you lose resources. You could have the knowledge drained. It's say that you will be losing the knowledge, or worse than that, the knowledge could go to your competitors. So automation by Ansible at the dev level means quicker, more predictable, and more reliable deployments. Okay, so this one is the main goal for the challenges that we are facing with Ansible. So moving to the operation challenges. Ansible automation helps streamline and simplify deployment. Why? What is the meaning of that? It says that deployment times are often reduced, and it helps mitigate what's known as shadow IT. What is the shadow IT? Shadow IT are all those processes or practices that are not following the company standards, the guidance that we provide as company to the team. So we'll be mitigating that. And again, this refers to information technology systems and solutions that are built and used inside organizations without organization explicit approval or knowledge, okay? So Ansible makes the provisioning of systems quicker and easier through automation. And here again, with Ops, Ansible reduces the risk of tribal knowledge. It's the same that the previous slide, right? And finally, with respect to this Ops challenges, Ansible automation also make it possible to automate patching. If the company is using in the manual way the patching, through Ansible you could automate that, which results in potentially huge time and cost saving, as well as risk reduction. Remember, we'll be reducing human intervention and error. We'll be doing faster. We'll be doing in a more reliable way. So that implies time and cost reduction, certainly. So moving to how Ansible is addressing security and QA challenges. So Ansible automation can serve to establish a secure baseline from which to start and proceed. With Ansible, establishing identical development, production, and QA environment is not only possible, but it is significantly simplified, right? Because certainly we have a lot of ways to do it. However, through Ansible is very simple. It's easier than other ways. So Ansible can ensure compliance requirements are documented and that those requirements are visible and accurate. So finally, we could say as a result that Ansible provides what's known as living documentation. And what this means is that as systems evolve, so does the documentation. This is other important issue that we have into the organization. Sometimes the coding is moving faster than the documentation. You will see that in Ansible, you need to document through patterns, through plugins, everything what you're doing in an easy way, right? It's at the same time that you are linking codes, you will document it, what you're doing. So that way, you will have the same velocity for coding and for documentation as well. It sounds difficult to get that, right? But through Ansible, you will see that you could do it. So summarizing, right? Establish security baseline, identical deployment productions, compliance requirement visibility, and living documentation established. So let's go to the last one, the last challenges. From a business level, using Ansible means that business and IT are aligned. And this is acutely important today, as virtually every business is essentially a digital business, right? So I cannot imagine a business that is not digital so far. So it alleviates the business from having to perform repetitive, complicated, and risky infrastructure and configuration tasks. How? Liberating time for important activities like innovation, strategy, and growth. It's the focus won't be to be configuring and setting infrastructure, setting tools. The focus should be innovation, strategy, and growth. So due to its existence as living documentation that we mentioned in the previous slide, we could easily understand and manage infrastructure and configuration. So Ansible automation simplifies onboarding for new team members as well. Remember that if we have all documented and all the processes clearly defined, certainly the onboarding of new people will be faster. So as a result, Ansible is truly built for development because it's effectively improved the collaboration capability across diverse teams within the enterprise. So again, for really great blocks to face the challenges of DevOps, so business and IT alignment, more time available for innovation, easier onboarding, as I mentioned, and improve cross-team collaboration capability. So why we are using Ansible for DevOps? You could imagine, right, that repetitive tasks that have to be configured out every time are just huge time and money wasters. So with Ansible, IT problems are solved one time, that then that solution is automated. The automated solution is then applied, and the result simplification of infrastructure and configuration effectively accelerates DevOps initiative. That is the main reason, right? So solve IT problems once not more than once. Automate the solution, apply the automate solution, and accelerate DevOps. So you could see how is the relationship between Ansible and DevOps, right? So it's that, and certainly are much harder to innovate and located bottlenecks and error within, right? So this serves to deliver a solution faster, and of course, faster to market in business leads to success, because our focus are business. So it also saves time, and that times that saved can be allocated to other important tasks, as or like innovation, like the other activities that we mentioned before. So Ansible IT automation also accelerate business, not only technology. So looking at it from the team perspective, it saves times and enhances productivity, right? Because it simplifies and eliminates repetition. It reduces the propensity to mistakes and errors, human mistakes and errors, and improves the ability, for the team members to collaborate each other. So for the enterprise, it reduces overall complexity, frees time for other activities, as we mentioned, innovation, improved compliance, or accountability. So continue with the automation accelerate business. We could say that, sorry about that. Yes, summarizing, we could say that the main goal for automation related to business is, again, to improve the ability to collaborate, improve compliance and accountability, so on. Moving to the next slide, and really we have a lot of information to cover, so I'm really sorry if I'm moving faster than usual. Just to check the communication quality, are you still hearing me, right? Just to be sure that I'm not talking to myself.
Yes, we can all hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So why we are saying that IT automation is for everyone, and it's not only for high expert resources. Ansible automation is considered to be for everyone, that is, everyone in the enterprise, not only in the IT department. Because it's simple, easy to read, you will see, easy to learn. It frees time for both, for development and ops. It's a tool that applied for both departments, not only for devs. And for that reason, we could say that it's pure DevOps. It's somewhat self-documented because it's so easy to read and is considered living documentation, as we mentioned. It's also readable across the enterprise, again, because it's simple. And one of the rationales for development Ansible was the fact that those configuration management tools of the time were based on Ruby. You have to be a Ruby programmer really to understand and read. So it certainly wasn't for everyone across the enterprise, right? So Ruby is something that we need to know. So what are the benefits to implement, to use Ansible? First, simplicity. We said that. It's easily human readable, and because tasks are executed in order, this enhances simplicity. There's no special coding knowledge required, and it enhances productivity because it uses an agentless architecture. This is really very, very important, and uses open SSH. It can communicate with Linux devices, with networking devices, and so on. So it uses Win Remote Management, or as you probably know as WinRM for Windows management. And it's also very, very secure. So there is no agent to exploit that really encrypt all the communication between the application. And it's predictable and reliable. In fact, there is no agents to update. You know perfectly the importance of this. So you know that the system is simple and ready to communicate with those managed nodes. It's powerful for configuring management. It can also deploy apps. It can orchestrate diverse workflows, as well as the entire application lifecycle. So I don't know, a lot of functionalities. It's provided with community support. It's in fact the most popular open source automation tools on GitHub. There is over 3,500 contributors and growing. So every time that you need any specific support, there are a lot of forums where you could go. And currently sits with over 250,000 downloads per month. So you can imagine how popular it's starting to be Ansible, right? So what are the advantages of Ansible? Ansible certainly has a huge number of advantages. Summarizing, we could include agentless architecture. You mentioned that in the previous slide. Security, simplicity. It's extensible. It's considered as like a comprehensive tool, whereas other tools in the space may require a number of different tools to be integrated together. It can perform network automation because of its simple agentless architecture, and it's also capable of cloud and local infrastructure integration. So now you know the main 7 advantages. Let's go deeper with the advantages. So let's look at these advantages a little bit closer. So it's agentless architecture. I said that, right? So that means that no special software is required on remote machine, like Citrix, for instance. We could do it without any remote machine to manage the different nodes. This means that the setup is significantly easier than most of its competitors. It's also very secure. There's no dedicated or special user or credential required to run Ansible on the remote node. It, in fact, respects existing credentials. So this is other important things to consider. Its simplicity is one of its major strengths. So, for example, playbooks, and we'll see what are the playbooks, are written in a human-readable WAML format. This is the format for playbooks in Ansible. And it can also encapsulate playbook task into a combination of tasks called roles. So playbooks, roles are really very secure structure of information, and all of them are human readable. Ansible is extensible by virtue of the fact that it issues modules and plugins. So let's go to more advantages. It is considered a unified or comprehensive tool. So tasks-based function is applicable across a diverse range of use cases. And you don't have to orchestrate a combination of different tools together, as you know. It is considered a unified tool. You could manage everything under the Ansible architecture. And it also lends itself well to work automation because of its simple agentless architecture and its task-based functionality as well. So it also supports major network vendors like Cisco, like HP, Juniper, Cumulus, and others that I really don't remember at this point. So Ansible is also capable of integrating both on-prem and remote cloud technology and infrastructure with local infrastructure. So you could use it in all the different networking configuration that you have, combining local cloud, internal cloud, external cloud, and is the same not for it's the same for logical and physical configuration as well. So let's move to the Ansible prerequisite. This is a really very interesting part because we need to consider all what we'll be discussing before to install Ansible. So always knowing this part, simple to use, fast, get up and running, a few requirements, the control machines or no. So let's try to explain this slide, right? So one of the Ansible's strengths is that it is so simple to use. I'm saying this really a lot of times, but you will see when you try to implement Ansible for the very first time, you will remember me. So you can get up and running with Ansible very, very quickly with very few requirements for installation on either a control machine or managed node or target machines. Let's consider the prerequisite for both at this point. So first, control machine requirements. For the operating system, for the control machine, virtually every major Linux distribution is supported. I'm saying that because, as you know, there are several versions of Linux. So the major Linux distribution is supported, as well as Mac OS. However, Windows is not supported as the operating system for control machine. So this is a limitation that we have for control machines, not for nodes. So we could have Windows in the nodes, but not in the control machine. So the current version of Ansible just requires any supported operating system and Python 2. The versions that allowed at this moment, as you could see right there, are version 2.7 or Python 3 or Python 3.5 and up. So this is the only consideration that you need to have for Python. So you will typically see Ansible on Red Hat, on CentOS, on Debian, and Ubuntu, as well as Mac OS or BSD variants. So one note about Mac OS, by default, Mac OS is configured for a limited number of file handles. Remember that, because if you will try to install Ansible in Mac OS, you will face that limitation. And if you work with a large number of file handles, like when you are using Ansible for a control machine, for instance, you may see too many open files errors in Mac OS. So, and if that is the case, you can easily increase the limit with one launch control command. Okay, so don't hesitate if you have that issue, you could modify with the command. So the Ansible architecture, as you could see here, basically includes or could include public and private clouds, certainly the configuration management database, different hosts, different networking infrastructures. The users through the playbooks will be accessing to the Ansible automation engine. And into the engine, you will have the inventory of all the apps. You will have the APIs. You will have the different modules and plugins. So as you could see, it's a simple architecture that includes everything what we need to orchestrate DevOps and Ops. And I mentioned that we have in Ansible different elements that we need to consider. So the main is the playbooks. So this is the definition of playbooks captured from Ansible official documentation. So really, it's at this point it's better to read than try to explain in another way, because this is the true information, right? So an Ansible playbook is an organized unit of scripts that defines work for a server configuration manages. It's the typical coding. So remember that Ansible is a configuration management tool. So the way to perform the configuration is through the playbook. And here you have some example of coding where we are defining the different accesses. We define some error messages and so on. So playbooks will be the place where you will be coding all the interfaces, the accesses, the plugins, etc. Okay. So the first example about the command lines tools typically is the syntaxes of the different codes, and I'll provide you some examples, right? I did prevent you that this part will be a little technical, but it's really very important to understand the power of Ansible. So let's start with the first command, which is Ansible. Ansible is an extra simple tool, and this command allows you to define and run a single task playbook, again, a set of hosts, right? So you will start your coding, you will be defining, running, and accessing to a playbook. So remember that the playbook is the place where you will be coding. So you will do it through this command, Ansible. So the following Ansible playbook, it's to specifically run Ansible playbooks, which are a configuration and multi-node deployment system. This is specifically for multi-node deployment system. The following Ansible Bolt, you can encrypt any structured data file used by Ansible. So remember security, through this simple command, you will be encrypting this, all the data that you will be using. So again, simple and secure. The other command, Ansible Galaxy, it's a command to manage Ansible roles in shared repository, because you could have different roles disseminated in several servers. So through a simple command, you could manage different roles, and the default of which is Ansible Galaxy, for instance, is the default for this role definition. So we have a lot of commands. I really included this list. The Ansible console is other important because allows to run ad hoc tasks against a chosen inventory. The Ansible config is to config command line class. The Ansible doc displayed the information on module installed in Ansible libraries. So it's the way to access to the different libraries where you have the playbooks. And it display a terse listing of plugins on their short description, provides a printout of their documentation streams. The Ansible inventory is used to display or dump the configure inventory as Ansible says. Finally, the Ansible pool, it's basically is to up a remote copy of Ansible on each managed node, right? You could have different copies of your node to back up the information, and it's set to run via Chrome and update playbooks source via source repository. So this inverts the default push architecture of Ansible into a pool architecture, which is as near limitless scaling potential. Remember that we said at the beginning of the webinar that to scale application is one of the main elements of business velocity. So through a simple command, you could do it. Let's go to plugins. So the plugins are different, are pieces of code of Ansible core functionalities. So you could use, or Ansible use, a plugin architecture to enable flexible and expandable feature sets. So you could transmit different configurations and architectures to other nodes and to other libraries through the plugins. Ansible contains a number of handy plugins. You can easily use it and adapt it to your coding. So I only mention the amount of plugins that you have, and it's not the intention to describe as I did for the command in the previous slide, but certainly when you receive this presentation, you could consider all the plugins, and each plugin has a typical functionality that you could use on your configurations. The filters in Ansible are used to transform data inside the template expression. It's you don't need to run a specific coding or to develop a specific coding to transform data. You could do it through a huge amount of filters that Ansible provides. You only need to know what each filter is doing and only applying, referring the template and certainly the input template and the output template. All the transformation will be done automatically. And finally, the patterns that you have in Ansible is the way that you will use to decide which host you will be managing. Remember that you could be working with different hosts, with different nodes, and through the patterns, you will be defining where you are. So additionally, you could use the pattern to communicate the playbooks each other's, and doesn't matter if the playbooks are located in different hosts. So usually a pattern refers a set of groups, right? It's a set of hosts, and that are logical defined, and they are referring to physical web servers. So this last bullet is really critical. So to use Ansible, you'll first need to know how to tell Ansible which host is in your inventory. It's when you define the architecture, the initial architecture, you need to define which host you will be using for the inventory. Let me come back to here. It's when you define the Ansible architecture, you need to define exactly which hosts you will be using for your inventory and the relationship each other. And you will be managing the host and inventory relationship through patterns. The final conclusion for Ansible. Ansible, several words that we mentioned: simplicity, reduced complexity, reliable, right? So it's the appropriated tools for your environment. It respects all the security rules. So you could protect your data, you could protect your information through Ansible as well. It's a good interface between different protocols, since it uses OpenSSH for transportation. And other important things is that you could audit all the transactions, since it's a language designed to be audited. And finally, for enterprise environments, Ansible contains the enough tools and functions to orchestrate all the applications for development, for testing, and for operation as well. So with that, we conclude the different topics that I really would like to cover with you. This is the moment for questions and answer. Usually, if we have the time to respond the question online, we do. If not, you could send your questions after reading in a more detailed way the material by email, and it will be my pleasure to support you with my answers.
Thank you, Adrian. That was great. That was a great learning process. I enjoyed the webinar and it was great. I'm going to stop the recording now and hopefully I'll see you again.
Okay, before you do it, thank you very much for your attendance. It is a pleasure to share this type of tools that allows and then contribute for the digital transformation of the company. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the day, evening, wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.